So let's now look at transformation. So transformations are effects that can be applied to any node. And there's a couple different transformations that JavaFX supports. We're going to look at three of them: translation, scaling, and rotation. So translation is just a slide. It's basically moving a node from one position to another. And you access a translation, or apply a translation, I should say, with the set translate X or set translate Y methods. Scaling allows you to enlarge or shrink the display of the node, and you apply that with the set scale X and set scale Y. And then rotation is a turn, and you can apply that with the set rotate, sending in a double. That double is the number of degrees. It can be either positive or negative to represent a clockwise or a counterclockwise rotation. Now, one really important thing to note is that applying a this should say transformation, so any of these three. Applying a transformation does not change the underlying characteristics of the node. So it just changes the display that you see, but the built-in characteristics, think about it like the instance data variables that describe that node, those are not changed. So it only changes the display. Note that you can also apply these transformations to a whole group. So if you wanted to group together a bunch of shapes, transform them all in some way, that you can do that. Okay, so let's just take a look at an example that I have put together, and then you can pull up the code for. So we're gonna look at some of these different transformations. Okay, so we're going to start with just looking at translation. So here we're going to just use a simple rectangle. So we haven't talked about the rectangle class yet. We're going to do that within this set of videos a little bit later. But essentially we're just creating a rectangle object, which is, as it sounds, just a visual display of a rectangle. And we're going to create that rectangle at the starting position 100, 100, with length 100 and width of 50. But then I've got a little loop here where I'm actually going to create 10 rectangles. I'm going to create 10 rectangles with those same properties, but then I'm going to translate them by 10 pixels, then 20 pixels, 30 pixels, 40 pixels, and so on. Okay, now I'm going to have the rectangles be transparent, so no fill, and the stroke of black. Then I'm just going to, that's an outline color, I should say, of black. Then I'm just going to add all of these rectangles to a group. So here I've got a group, and that group I'm then going to add to just a flow pane, and that's what's going to be my root node, is that flow pane. So we'll have here we go. In this example, we'd have our flow pane. Sorry, I'm trying to make this a little easier to see. And beneath that flow pane is our group. And then our group is going to have our 10 rectangles. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like. So it looks like this. So here's that original rectangle, and then I've got 10 of them. If I were to just do one rectangle, you can see that here. But then I'm adding, if I were to add on another, you'll see we create a second rectangle, but we translate it down and to the right by 10 pixels, and then I'll create a third, and so on and so on. So this basically allows you to just shift things left and right. Obviously, you can do that with just a single node. You don't have to create multiple nodes. I'm just creating multiple nodes here, in this case, multiple rectangles, to just show you what it looks like, to just kind of give you an idea of that. But I also want to show you what I mean when I said that the underlying characteristics of the node itself aren't changed. So let's just look at another example here. So I'm just going to create a rectangle that starts at position 0, 0 and is 10 wide and 10 high, but I'm not even going to add it to my scene graph. So we're not going to visually see this rectangle. I'm just going to print it out. So I just want you to see the characteristics of this rectangle. So just ignore the visual part here for a minute and look down here at my printout, my console, and you can see that the X and Y of this rectangle is 0 and 0, and the width is 10 and the height is 10. But now let me set the translate property, and you'll see what happens. So again, we're just ignoring the visual for a minute. So here I've translated this rectangle by 50 in the X direction, but you'll notice that the X and Y aren't changed. So if this rectangle had been added to my scene graph, which I can do that, so why don't we can go ahead and do that. Let me actually make it red so that we can really see it. And then we'll go ahead and add it. Okay, so again, this is the non-translated rectangle. You can see it right up there. It's pretty small. Let me make it a little bigger so we can see it a little better. I'll just keep it the same size actually. Okay, and let's have it filled in. Okay, so there you can see, there it is up there. Okay, and now if I translate it, you'll see that it's in a different spot. Oops, should be in a different spot. Maybe it's just not showing up enough. Maybe we didn't move it enough to be able to see. Hang on one moment. Sorry, we couldn't see that shift because of the flow pane. Sometimes flow pane does strange things to specified nodes with specific spots for the layout. So for now, I just changed my root node to be just the group, and now you'll be able to see. So let me just comment this out again. First, there's our 10 rectangles that you can see with the translation. Okay, and then here we're going to add that red one, translated. So there it is. So there it is, not translated, up in the top left corner, and there it is, translated 50 over, sorry, there it is, translated 50 over to the right. Okay, so you can see that the visual display of this rectangle has moved, but again, down here where we see the actual properties of the rectangle, it has not. Now, if we wanted to see what the translate property was, we can do that by saying r1.get translate x. And so now again, take a look at what's being printed down below. It's going to tell us that it's being translated 50. Okay, so that's just a kind of it's a very subtle but important distinction to understand here, that when we apply these transformations, we're visually going to see the node in a different position or in a different size or shape or something like that, but the underlying node itself hasn't been changed. It's just like we are taking that node with all its original properties and we're just either moving it or scaling it or rotating it, but the node itself hasn't changed. Okay, all right, so I'm going to comment out this part here. And so that's it. Translation. Again, translation is basically just like sliding. It's just taking the display where an image, where a node is displayed and shifting it in one direction or another. So kind of sliding it around. Okay. So let's look at the next transformation type, which is scaling. So for the scaling, I'm going to actually add an image here. So here I create an image. I'm going to use that same image we just created, the dog's image. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller this time. 100 by 100 perhaps, keeping that ratio, and I'm going to have it smooth. Then I create my dog image view. I'm going to create a second image view object that I call small dog image view. So both of these image views use the same image, I'm creating two of them. And for my small dog image view, I'm going to invoke that set scale X and set scale Y. So here I'm basically just going to shrink my image view so that it's smaller by 50%. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an HBox and put the two image views next to each other. So remember, an HBox keeps our nodes in one per column. Sorry, one per row, right next to each other. And then I'm going to take that image box and just add it to my group. So let's take a look what this looks like. There we go. So there, actually let me make this a little bit, sorry, I made it too small. Let's try again. Okay, so there we can see our original image view is that 100 by 100, and our shrunk image view is half that size. So we've got two image views. One was created just with the image, and then one was created with the image, and then we scaled it down. So this can be really good for, again, kind of changing the scale of things. Okay. Now we can also now know how to rotate that image. So what we can do is we can say on both of these, dog image view, sorry, we haven't done rotating yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's now look at rotating. Before we do that, again, scaling is just kind of shrinking or enlarging. So if I wanted to enlarge instead of shrink, I could do that, and that would look like this. So now you see that second image is twice as big as the first image. Okay. Oops. And let's use all of our, okay. So that's scaling. let's look back and let's put this back at 0.5 here. Okay. Let's now look at rotation. Okay. So now I'm going to take that, I'm going to create a third image view. I'm going to call it rotated dog image view. Again, using that same image. And I'm just going to rotate it a certain number of degrees. So let's rotate it 90 degrees, and that'll turn it 90 degrees clockwise. And then I'm going to add that again to this H box. And there we go. We can see that image is now rotated. If we rotated it negative 90 degrees, you can see that it goes counterclockwise, which obviously is not what we want. So let's put it back to 90 degrees. So again, kind of, moving things around, scaling them, so enlarging or shrinking them, or rotating them is pretty easy. You just invoke those methods of set translate x, set translate y, set scale x, set scale y, or set rotate, and then send in the number of degrees you want rotated. And that allows you to do all of those transformations on any type of node. Okay. Now again, you can also rotate or apply any of these transformations to an entire group. So if you were to group together some things, you can rotate the entire group of nodes. So that can be really useful when you're dealing with drawings and animation and things like that. If you want to kind of group together a bunch of nodes to create one picture or one sort of, one view, one image, one group of nodes, you can apply that transformation to the whole group. So you can slide the whole group over by a certain number of pixels, or you can rotate the whole group by a certain number of degrees, and so on. So we can actually now go back to our previous example too, where we just were showing the dog image with the label, and we can rotate that so it's looking the proper way. So now I can go back to dog image view, and let's set the rotate to be 90 degrees. And now this program, that looks a lot better. Okay. Now you'll notice here again what kind of which one were we using here? Now with using our VBox here on this one, the text ended up on top of that image, which is a little bit strange. Let's try setting some spacing. That's a little better. Let's make it a little bit bigger spacing. Sometimes with the layouts on a GUI, you just kind of have to play with it until you get it to look how you want. So there we go. That kind of moved it down a bit. Okay. That most likely was happening because the sizing, sometimes the sizing with an image view and how it fits in with the rest of the components or elements within your scene graph, you might have to again do a little bit of manipulation to get it to look exactly how you want it to look. But again, the example here we were looking at primarily was these transformations. So I encourage you to play around with it, kind of apply some different transformations to different nodes, and get the hang of what it looks like to do translates and scales and rotates.